Hello, everybody. Happy Fossil Friday, and welcome back to Fossil Friday Chats. I'm one of your hosts, Brittany Stoneberg from the Western Science Center. With me, as always, is Gabriel Santos from the Raymond M. Alf Museum of Paleontology.
Good morning, everybody. TGI Fossil Friday.
And today, joining us is Zach Reid. Zach, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you guys? Well, I guess you guys are doing good, but I'm doing good.
You're on a TARDIS. You can't be doing that bad.
Yeah, you're doing
No,
fine.
it's all wibbly wobbly. It's like a big ball of timey-wimey.
I mean, does time really truly mean anything in 2020 anymore?
No, and we're on Friday the
Really?
13th of 2020, so...
Oh, it's Friday the
You picked
13th.
That's true. You have picked the perfect Friday for your presentation, Zach. I'm sure nothing crazy will happen.
Right, it's like in math. 2 negatives. It's just going to make a positive.
Yeah, so we're very excited to have Zach on today. He's going to be teaching us a lot about paleontology and his journey towards the field. Zach is a master's student, and correct, right? You're a master's student. I'm looking at the correct bio information right now.
Yes.
And he attended Montana State University for his BS in Earth Sciences with a concentration in paleontology, and he's now pursuing his master's in science communication at the University of Buffalo. He is a former amateur MMA fighter, comic book lover, cosplayer, and now he's trying to start up his own podcast and YouTube channel. That is all very cool.
Yes, it's very ambitious. A lot of sugar is needed to keep up with everything.
Hey, we feel it.
Caffeine and sugar, you'll be fine.
Exactly.
You're in good company. Brittany and I are the same amount of ridiculousness when it comes to projects, especially because we do cosplay for science too. So we're really excited to see what you do, and also maybe you might inspire us to maybe go do more, which actually is not a great thing, but we'll see how it goes.
Oh, it's fine, guys. It's Friday. After this, we will all, finish up our work days and take a nap. It'll be fine.
What's a nap?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I've heard of it.
It's a mythical thing.
All right, everybody. If you have questions for Zach, as always, go ahead and put them in the chat. We will have a brief Q&A session after Zach's presentation, and we will do our absolute best to get through as many questions as we are able. So, Zach, whenever you are ready, go ahead and take it away.
All right. Well, once again, hello, everybody. I'm Zach. Like they've said, I am a former undergrad student at Montana State University. My degree was in Earth Sciences with a concentration in paleontology, and I'm currently at the university at Buffalo for a master's in science in the public, or science communication, as well as starting up my own personal YouTube channel, The Source Thesaurus, and the Sora podcast. I also happen to dabble as a master in the dark arts. All right, so kind of to get started on this, just as a forewarning, there is a bit of discussion on mental health and kind of personal effects that have come along with that. So if any of that material is sensitive to you guys, just be forewarned. I'll also give you guys kind of a heads up as I get to that part of this discussion. So, to start, I was a tiny person who lived in Chicago, Illinois, or about 30 minutes outside of the city in a town called Lansing. Growing up, my parents basically needed something to keep me contained because I was just a ball of energy and a Tasmanian devil. And they happened to find I really enjoyed watching dinosaur documentaries and movies and all that sort of stuff. So they started getting me all the movies and books and all that material. And as you can see here, one of my favorite places to go was the Chicago Field Museum. I was that kid that would go through every exhibit and be able to list every single detail of every exhibit, animal, fossil specimen, etc. And along with that came, my grandparents and parents buying me all the little toys and figurines, as well as kids' books. And they kind of upgraded slowly to things like eyewitness books and stuff like that. And as I got deeper into those and got kind of past just toddler, young kid to an actual, elementary school kid, I started to discover that there's actual people who do this for a living. And that since then, that was my sole goal in life, was to become a paleontologist. A funny story that a neighbor of ours who I grew up with, her daughters, she loves telling, is in the middle of pre-K, they ask all the kids what they want to be, and all the kids stand up and they say fireman, politician, astronaut. And I stand up and I say paleontologist, and the entire room just goes, what? So since an early age, this is fascinated and kind of captured my attention. And as I got older, I started to, especially towards middle school and high school, I started to understand that I needed to kind of decide how I was going to get into paleontology. So I looked up a lot of books and articles, and discovered a lot of them do either geology or biology. So through high school, I was very involved in STEM classes. And during that time, I also would volunteer with a group called Project Exploration. Now, this was in conjunction with Paul Sereno. They did work with the Field Museum. My grandma actually found this as a news article that they were talking about this group starting up, and what their outreach was to just instill science and STEM in general through the city of Chicago, especially within the inner city schools, which have always had kind of a lack of support when it came to the STEM programs. And so I wrote a letter or an email, I can't remember at this point, I'm so old. I wrote to my the program head and asked them, hey, I'm not a kid from the city of Chicago, I'm a kid in the suburbs, but I'm really passionate about paleontology. I know who Paul Sereno is. Can I do any volunteer work? And they said, absolutely, we'd love to have you in. And so in the start of 2009, I joined the program, and I would volunteer during the summers at the Field Museum doing their little pop-up paleo stations, and I would talk about fossils, or we'd have games for kids. We did, as you can see in these images, I did a thing called Reptile Fest, where we worked with Paul Sereno. We did a whole exhibit based on Super Croc, basically, and that was really fun. And when I was there, I got to pick kind of Paul's brain and ask him a couple questions, and I was telling him my interest in going to Montana State. And so let's go here. And so along with Project Exploration, I also have volunteered and been a member of a conservation group for years, which also has done a lot with my outreach interest, which is the Isaac Walton League of America. The reason I bring that up is it'll kind of come back later when I go into grad school. But so paleontology, conservation, just being an outdoors kind of person have always been kind of a big part of my life, and always, influenced me. So when I was talking with Paul at one point about schooling, I told him I wanted to go to Montana State because I knew through my high school research that this was one of the few schools in the country that offers an undergrad paleo program. But I asked him if he had any other suggestions, and he told me to look into places like Michigan and South Dakota School of Mines and Tech. And then I had some high school advisors who basically kept trying to keep me in state, which, as much as I like that, and there's geo programs at the University of Illinois and some other schools, I really felt like these were the places I wanted to be. So I really worked hard to get accepted into Montana State. But there was not a lot of help with my high school advisors because of where I was located. Chicago more focuses on things like arts, business. A lot of that was kind of what my advisor was trying to kind of push me towards. But I was really passionate about this. I applied to School of Mines, and I applied to Montana State. And I got Montana State as my first choice, and they accepted me, and I immediately said, yes, let's go, let's do this. And when I got in there, the first couple years, even though I was at MSU, the reason I also picked it was in case some reason I fell out of love with paleontology. They had a very good wildlife and biology program, so I could still go into things like conservation and all that. So as I'm in MSU, I definitely, for the first couple of years, was not the traditional student. I was very, I was focused on classes, but I also didn't really know what my direction was. I knew I wanted to be a paleontologist. I knew I had to get a degree. And then in my head, I was like, okay, once I'm done with undergrad, the jobs will come a-flooding. Unfortunately, no one in the program really kind of sat me down and went, that's not how that works, you silly, silly child. So until I got into the later stages of MSU, I didn't even realize the importance of not just networking, but also doing things like research volunteering or helping with projects, stuff that later on for grad school would actually come back to bite me, which is kind of what has led me on my path. But in the meantime, I took a bunch of courses that, I did field work. I did a lot of geostructure classes, which I came to find out I was really good at and I really enjoyed. I did field camps. Like for MSU, we have to do both a geo field camp as well as a paleo field camp, which I think are really awesome because they teach you both elements that some paleontologists need. I know there's people who like working in the lab. I actually really enjoyed for a while there working in the field, being able just to explore and hike and prospect and do all this really cool stuff. And at this site, I actually I found a ankylosaur scoot, which is what you see in the picture there with the penny, because our advisor at the time, he was our ride back to camp. He kind of drove off, and someone had found what was later an Eocene horse limb, and he went and looked at that. Forgot that he left my team, the four of us in that picture, on the side of the road for over an hour and a half. So we're sitting there, and I got very bored and started just rock hammering one big rock on the side of the road because we had nothing else to do. He pulls up, and he's like, "What is Zach doing?" And I'm like, "I'm bored." And I hit the rock one more time, and it split open, and there was a scoot. And he walked up, grabbed it, went, "Good job, Zach," and threw it in the back of the car and told us to get in, and we left. But so I really, it's great to have moments like that. But yeah, so I loved the field experience. But then towards the end of my tenure at MSU, I had the opportunity to work with a couple other students who were doing some egg clutch research with the university. I happened to be working on a project with them, and I found a bunch of egg-based lit reviews to put into a project we were doing, and they, were like, "Hey, do you want to join us? Not just to do our lit, but to work on this." And we applied, we gave a poster presentation, we were approved for funding, we got thin sections made, we were all set, and then things kind of just happened, and the project never got completed. But that was like my first real taste of research, and I was really enjoying it. Unfortunately, that came within the last 8-9 months of my academic career, so I was kind of already on the way out and wasn't fully mentally geared to do research, which, if one thing anyone takes away if they're in an undergrad program, if there's any opportunities you have to work at a museum and volunteer or work in a lab or work with a professor on any form or fashion of something, even if it's nothing super astronomical and you're not naming a new dinosaur, but you're just helping, it really does come back, and it pays off later on in life, in your career. At this point, I had kind of fizzled out in terms of my passion to be in academia. I had some personal turmoils with faculty and academics that I did not see eye to eye with. I'm a very strong-willed and opinionated person, and that doesn't work well sometimes. So by the end of that tenure, I was burnt out. I was kind of like, I need to go do my own thing. And so I decided to go and cage fight, put my college degree and brains to work, getting the tar beat out of me. So I did that, and what was supposed to be a year of just focusing on that ended up kind of amalgamating into 6 months. And then I was already doing field work at Egg Mountain with Dave Verricchio, because I was already getting stir crazy at home. And while there, I got allowed to do prospecting projects. Like the upper left picture, you can see we were doing a site that another person was working on for a dromaeosaur. We prospected there. While we were there, this was our last year on the grant. So it was more kind of a clear away as much as we can, see what we can find. The year previous, a friend of mine had found a Cretaceous mammal fossil, which was super exciting for everyone. It eventually ended up in a presentation we saw in Australia where we met Gabe, because they were talking about that specific mammal fossil later on. We also found a tyrannosaurid tooth, and then mainly it was just eggshell fragments and a bit of a lizard fossil that almost got thrown out over the edge of the quarry there because the gentleman was not paying attention. That would have ended poorly. But being at that field site, it reinvigorated my passion to want to be in paleo, want to do research, want to do stuff like that. So while all this is going on, I'm plotting out where I want to go for school and what I want to do. Unfortunately, again, I don't know if you would apply it to pride or ego. I thought I could figure it out all on my own. I didn't really ask my colleagues too much for help. And so I ended up kind of shooting myself in the foot because I applied to grad schools that year like I would undergrad. I just kind of went in with a blank list of ideas. I had some professors I kind of wanted to work with, but I never spoke to them. And then I also had my letters of rec. And the first year that I applied, I got no answers back. I got all rejections across the board because I did not do anything the correct way. And while this was happening, let's see. So while this was happening, I also had personal relationship things happen, and I also had my MMA career, my last fight. I lost. So my ego in the span of 3 weeks took some major hits. So at this point, this is again the part where I'm going to let you guys know this is where kind of the mental health aspect comes into play. So if anyone has any trigger warning, I'm going to talk about imposter syndrome, stuff like that coming up. So within a month of losing a fight, personal problems, and being rejected from all 5 schools I applied to, I kind of got into a rut and a slump and was not in the best headspace. And I started kind of having self-doubt and just this downward spiral of it's all my fault, I don't do things right, etc. But at the same time, I was corresponding with an old research partner of mine and a friend of mine from MSU. Now she's a PhD student, Deborah Hawk, who at the time was getting ready to go to SVP in Calgary in 2017. And at that point, I was super disillusioned. I was kind of just adrift in the wind. I didn't know what I was going to do, where I was going to end up. I kind of felt like an abject failure. And a couple times I would correspond with her, she would just slowly pepper in, come to SVP, come to SVP. And this is where my imposter syndrome kind of overrode me and told me, no, you don't belong there. You're not on the level of all of these people. To which she told me, that's silly. If you don't come, I'm going to drive up to Chicago and I'm going to slap you. Like, she was really trying to get me to come. So I conceded and went up to Calgary and followed her around, and she introduced me to people, and I got to network and just kind of talk about ideas and what I wanted to research and what I was interested in. And so we kept going. We kept going through all this, and at that point, I actually met through her friend who was up there with her from UNL, Justin Wilkins, who at the time was working at the Mammoth site in Hot Springs, South Dakota. Now, it's funny because the previous year, while coming back from Egg Mountain, I had also been at the Mammoth site. It was on my route home back to Chicago. And when I went up to the School of Mines and Tech in 2009 for a tour, I'd also been there. So it serendipitously became kind of like a reoccurring third time's a charm. This thing's come back into my life. Maybe I'll give it a chance. And they had their summer internship program. And at the time, I was like, I have nothing else to lose. Let's try this. And at the same time, I was applying to a couple different master's programs for evolutionary biology and paleoecology, because that was the stuff that really I was passionate about. And so I had applied. I did. I actually this time was told you actually need to talk to the possible advisors and people within your grad program, which, if anything, also make sure if you're going to go into a grad program, you talk to the professor and make sure you want to speak with them, or not just speak with them, but you can gel with them. So they work with you, you work with them. It's very important you got that harmonious work together. So at the time I was talking with Kate Lyons, and she was telling me I definitely needed a little bit more research in my portfolio. I just needed more experience. I needed to bring up my GRE scores and better letters of recommendation. And so that kind of lit a fire in me to be like, okay, I've got someone who's backing me. I've got other people who are backing me. Let's do this. And so in going to the Mammoth site, they had, you worked both in the lab, you worked in the museum itself, because it's an active dig site during the summer. So they've got interns and volunteers excavating at all times. And I kind of half joke that we were like Chuck E. Cheese animatronics in a museum. Like, you'd walk by a certain section and you'd ask me something and I could talk to them. So it really got me engaged in public outreach, communicating with them about the museum, learning how to talk to different people from all different walks of life, as well as we taught a 2-hour class that kind of condensed what a field site experience would be like. So we taught them how to make a grid. We taught them how to identify things. We did jacketing. It was a really fun experience. And in doing so, those 2 hours, I got to be very personal with people and realize that people from all walks of life love this stuff. And just because they're in a different profession or walk of life doesn't mean that that cuts them off from being willing to engage or learn. So with that in mind, I kept kind of having that in the back of my head as I went through my application for my third time to specifically UNL, because I really wanted to get into this program. And at that point, I got into the interview process. And when I came in, I discussed that I wanted to do my research, as well as I wanted to have a part of it be about science education and outreach. And they were all for that. I think I impressed really well, but at the end of the day, because I had a lack of research experience, that's kind of what kneecapped me. So after all that, I kind of fell into a what am I doing next? What comes next for me? Do I just keep grinding away and trying to apply to academic program after academic program after academic program? Or do I take what I've learned and do my own thing? And I kind of sat there and was like, well, what made me want to be a paleontologist? It wasn't just doing research. It wasn't just finding dinosaurs and naming them. It was, I wanted to find dinosaurs, work on stuff, and also just talk to people and just gush over this stuff, nerd out like I do with my friends about comic books or pro wrestling or MMA, just be able to, for lack of a better, just geek out over these really cool things. And in doing so, I also noted my frustration with certain people I've encountered over the last couple years, that certain paleontologists are like, nah, we put our data out there. That's what the public wants. And it's like, no, I kind of want to really be out there and engaging. And I mentioned it with Gabe when I met him in Australia. I really think paleontology could do with a Steve Irwin kind of character, just this hyper energetic, just pure energy in khaki shorts. And so while I have little bits of quality, I can't pull off khaki shorts, but I have energy and I want to give my go at it. So what I ended up doing was I applied to the University at Buffalo for their Science in the Public program, which they focus on not just pure education, but they look at social media. They look at all the different digital forums, how that influences research, but how it also influences just the discussion of ideas and topics and thoughts. And recently there were papers that they were putting out on things like more on the political spectrum, but they were looking at how misinformation is handled, stuff like that. So that was a program I really gravitated towards, because I really do feel like things like Fossil Friday chats and other programs really do kind of break down the walls of this kind of divide we've had in institutes and museums and stuff with the public. And they just kind of realize, oh, these are a bunch of dorky people who love dorky things just like I do. So in the spirit of that, I decided to go in with my now partner, Deborah Hawk, who she kind of also pushed me to do this. I decided to start going in on a YouTube channel as well as a podcast, which one is the Thesaurus, which really hard to say sometimes because they all run together. But that will be more of a program where I want to look at the cool aspects of paleo that don't get covered a lot in the documentaries and the DVDs and the VHSs. Looking at female paleontologists, looking at the techniques that are used and going into it, but not doing it as a stuffy lecture, just a schmuck with a Godzilla t-shirt talking to you about it. And then the Sora podcast is kind of an expansion on that. Originally, it was supposed to be kind of an behind the scenes where I talk about all the stuff I didn't get to in a 15-minute video, and it's my stream of consciousness. And then I found I want my personality to show through on that. So we're starting to do things like watch-alongs, things that I realized with my partner. We were watching the original 1954 Godzilla because I'm that guy. And in the movie, they talk about where Godzilla comes from, and they show this structure map of Japan, and it is the weirdest map I have ever seen in the history of in anything geology I've seen. There was like a whole section where it looked like it was hollow earth, and then you had bedding that made no directional sense. And we spent 20 minutes, we paused the movie just to riff on it. And so I realized I've got friends who we all watch these movies. We watch the Dante's Peaks, and we're like, no, stop it. And that's kind of what I wanted to do. So in the next couple months and the coming year, I'm hoping once I get better at editing to start pumping out more and more product. I've got a couple episodes in the can. And while I'm doing that, I'm also working full time as well as going to the University of Buffalo for my master's degree. So along with that, at some point, I'm also hoping to get more involved with like academic mental health. As you guys have heard, I had a lot of what's called cognitive behavioral problems. So I've been going to people to see help for that. And I think that's very important, especially for grad students and other students, because it stacks up. So I've had to take a very long, weird, and winding way to get into this, but I wouldn't change a single moment of it, because if I didn't go through all the trials, the tribulations, the falls, the missteps, I would not be where I am here. I wouldn't be talking to everyone. I wouldn't be talking to Brittany and Gabe. While sometimes it's tough, it also sometimes ends up being the best thing. So ending on that, I would just say it doesn't always have to be the ABC method. You can make your own way in this as long as the passion and the drive is there. You can make your own way in paleo. You don't have to just be a doctorate to a PhD to be able to just do it. So yeah, with that is the end of my spiel. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate having the opportunity.
Thanks, Zach.
Thank you so much, Zach.
Let's see. Okay, that was really cool.
Yeah, thank you so much, Zach.
For me,
really appreciate it.
Yeah, for me, listening to your story is very like similar to mine because, like, you know, I mean, mine was a little different. I always didn't want to be a paleontologist. I didn't get into paleontology until like I was 20 something. But even now, like, I'm not really looking into academia. I'm looking more at like science communication and education specifically. And like I think that's a common theme we've been trying to show on Fossil Friday chats is that there's more than one way to be a paleontologist. We can't call them alternative jobs. They're just different jobs in paleontology. And I think your path is another one that is a great one, especially one that we need. And I'm definitely looking forward to how your movie watch-alongs are, because that's the kind of stuff I love.
Yeah, some of them will be definitely more family, just general audience friendly. And then there's some, like the first episode that we've recorded, definitely a lot more just adult oriented. So I'll definitely have like little disclaimers for that. But half the fun is, you know, I loved being there with my friend who's a meteorology major and her just, oh yeah, no, that's right. Oh no, that's right. No, cows can't fly when the tornado picks them up.
What?
And it's like, oh, that's, yeah.
Oh man.
But
now I'm really sad.
Yeah.
Well, I have one question, Zach. So going into this program for science communication and doing all this, like, are you interested in eventually like learning how to like quantify the effectiveness of these kinds of programs, like trying to figure out like is there a way to see like if different science communication programs and methods are actually like really effective? Because I know Gabe and I have done a little bit of that, and so have other educators at our museums. And so I'm wondering if you're, as you go forward, interested in doing that sort of thing.
Yes, I'm actually really interested in that. I'm especially interested on the front of social media engagement. Devra and a couple other friends of mine can attest to this. I get like involved when like metrics get released of like YouTube engagements and Social Blade and all that stuff, because I'm super curious on different engagement platforms what their formula is that gets people hooked. What makes the audience really like certain subjects of science and certain subjects that aren't really that great, like some of the more so one of my big things that I did recently, and I might be looking into it more as like a research topic, is looking into places like PragerU and kind of that skewing of scientific information. So that's kind of the stuff I'm really interested in. But I am very much, I want to go forward looking into how audiences, both within a museum and on social media, are engaged, what gets their attention, what doesn't get their attention, how they find it, you know, how you retention is one big one that I always am fascinated with, because you have the drive-by people, and it's like in museums where you hear people talking about modifying and updating exhibit displays. You don't want the drive-by exhibit viewers where they just kind of walk by and go, oh yeah, that's a thing. But instead, you want that stop, look, read, engage, you know, that eyeball time. So that's stuff that really I'm fascinated in looking into more as I get deeper into my program.
Awesome. We should talk a
Great.
little bit more outside the show because that's kind of what we're doing with cosplay for science stuff too. So we've got some cool stuff to discuss if you're in for that.
Oh, absolutely, and I have plenty of costumes.
I miss cosplay. It's hard to do it at home
Well,
because nobody can appreciate
it
it.
is.
Anyway.
Plus, all of like me, I've been enjoying food and not being outside as much, so certain items don't fit on me quite as flatteringly.
I can't wear my my Night's Watch outfit right now because it's leather, and so that's not gonna work right now. So anyway.
So,
Zach, I have another question. So when you
Yeah,
were
absolutely.
going through school and like doing like the more quote traditional paleontology route, um, and then you talked a little bit about your mental health. How do you think we can be better in our field addressing that for students? Because I know that's something we talk about a lot at like SVP and just amongst our community. Um, but I'm interested into since you've been through it, and for those at home, this might be something if you're triggered by it, you may not want to, you may want to step away for a bit. But how do you think we can better address that for students in the field, or just in science in general?
So I think a couple things, and I also have the benefit of also having a partner who's in a deeper part of academia than I am even. But one of the major things is, especially for grad students, I know that the mentality needs to shift, that it's not just you're a student and you're going to classes, but then you have your research. It's a job, and it's a hard job, and you're putting in 9-10 hours on your research. Ingraining more into them this systemic idea of personal time, just stepping away. I mean, I've seen enough friends get frustrated with research, and they've shouted expletives, flipped tables, punched kittens. I mean, it's been really, you can see the frustration and all that bubbling up. But then if you're like, hey, we're gonna go do an escape room, all of a sudden all their problems have melted away for a couple minutes, and then they kind of can hit things. Being able to break that cycle of you just have to go and go and go and go and go, and make it more acceptable that you can walk away, you can take time, you can do hobbies, you need to get away from that stuff. I know for me, working out is a big thing. If my job ever calms down, I want to go back and do Brazilian jiu-jitsu and grappling, not even a competitive way, just to do it because it was always like fun, and it just let my mind go with the flow. In undergrad, a big thing, especially for me within Montana State, was there was this good old boy kind of mentality of we don't talk about our feelings. We do a shot of whiskey and we just keep going. But also, it just was, you didn't talk about it. Or if you did, at least back in 2010 to 2014, 15, it was more of a taboo. Like, oh, he's got a problem. Ooh. Whereas now, I think we're starting to normalize it more and understand that, one, just because you go to a therapist or go seek someone for help, it doesn't mean you're unhinged or you're some menace to society or you're one step away from a horror movie. For me, it's really cognitive. For me personally, I go and get what's called cognitive behavioral therapy. So I have always, if something happens, I spiral. I start assuming and calculating out the nearest possible worst case scenario, and I fixate it on, and it takes me away from my projects. And that spiral was my big problem, because sometimes I turn into a nervous wreck, anxiety, nausea, all that fun stuff. So what I've been going to therapy for is basically identifying those triggers and being able to kind of either, okay, this is a situation I need to walk away from, or things I just have to self-reaffirm to myself, like working on research right now for University at Buffalo. If I'm getting overwhelmed and swamped, there's like a notepad I have that I write things like what I've gotten done. And so I jot down everything I've done. and I look at all the things I have left, and I look at it and I go, oh, I've gotten so much more done than yesterday. And it helps you. Just those little things will help you. So it doesn't need to be like, some people do need to go get medication and that, but that's why you go seek a professional and you don't try to self-diagnose, because that, trust me, I did the mental, I'm a tough boy, yay, I get punched in the head, I don't show emotions, and it just didn't end well. It ended up with me just detonating, and spiraling really badly. So being able to reach out for help is a big thing. I think also needs to just be pushed heavily.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like for me, I have major depressive disorder, and so like it's the same thing where you can spiral, and if you don't reach out for help. And I think another thing is like we have this idea that rest is a reward. I think I saw it. Someone had posted it on Instagram where they're saying that, you know, rest is a reward, or should be a right, not a reward, and we have to kind of shift to that where it's like, okay, 5 o'clock, I'm done for the day. I'm just gonna go play Pokemon or watch movies and stuff like that. Instead of like, okay, I did enough work. I cannot do work at home. Those are like two different things that we have to shift away from.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I've explained, or at least my thought process is coming from a former athletic background. To be an athlete, you have to treat your body right, you have to eat right, you have to lift and run and stretch and do all this stuff. We really need to start treating the mind just like we would want if I want a six-pack. If I want a healthy brain, I need to start putting in the implementations that keep my brain healthy and relaxed. And with physical stuff, rest is important. Otherwise, you're going to rip something or blow something out. So the same thing with your mind. If you keep just stressing it, it's going to give at some point.
Really quick segue for that. You are the first paleontologist I've met that was also an MMA fighter, so that is one of the coolest things we've had on the show. What was that? I'm gonna ask you about that later because that's a bit off topic, but that's pretty cool. I've never met anyone who's done something like that.
Well, I will say, I think it emphasizes that I think paleontologists, we all have lives outside of paleo. As much as some of us love research and love certain aspects of the job, everybody should probably have a hobby or something that's outside of it. So it's cool that you've got this thing that is like completely outside of it.
Yeah, and it's nice because then it does something where I focus on something completely not mental. I mean, there is mental stuff in fighting, and I'm not going to go into the whole philosophies of that, but if I go to a gym and it's like, okay, guys, we're going to do an hour of kickboxing. Okay, I just have to focus on not getting hit and doing appropriate technique and working on moves. I don't really need to know how fast a short-faced bear could run, like my brain does not need to access that information.
Well, do you think you could take on a short-faced bear as we
Yeah,
try to get back into the science?
I was about to say, like, I guess the only way that would be applicable is if you were running and you were mentally calculating in your head, okay, if I keep this pace, I could possibly outrun, a Smilodon. Possibly, maybe, probably not.
Right, exactly. I mean, there was a guy in California who I think he choked out a cougar that, came after him, and he had a jiu-jitsu background. It's like, cool, good on you, not doing that.
It's like your hobby does not need to be applicable to your research, but every once in a while things converge.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like,
Oh my
what
goodness.
dinosaur do you think would be a great MMA fighter, Zach?
Oh Lord, that's hard because MMA you need dexterity and things like thumbs.
Oh,
I'd probably say like the raptors just because of their size and maneuverability. That they'd be pretty tough to out strategize even beyond the clever girl. But
oh, now I'm just thinking of Carnotaurus with its tiny arms.
I mean, he could kick
so well. Man.
So Zach, right now you're doing your master's in science in the public is what you said, right?
Yeah.
Have you found ways that can relate back to kind of like your previous work in more like the academic side of paleontology, or are you kind of like more focusing on science communication in general, or is there like way you can incorporate like your previous work into it?
So that is a big thing that I struggled with when I first made this jump was if I go to this, do I consider myself a paleontologist anymore? Because I'm now focusing on an avenue that at the time I thought had no real tangential connection back to paleo. But then I kind of came to the realization of I've always been more comfortable in museums and teaching and reaching out, and I really do think science communication, science in the public definitely has a role to play in museums. I think it needs to actually, or at least some museums I've encountered, definitely should invest and expand upon it. Especially right now with the I call it the plague, but the pandemic. With everything going on, I think this is a beautiful opportunity for museums to really find ways to reach out and creatively still talk to the public, even though not everyone can just travel and come into the museums anymore.
Yep. I mean, that's part of what we're trying to do through Fossil Friday chats. You know, both of our museums, the ALF Museum and the Western Science Center, our exhibit spaces are closed. So we definitely had to kind of find new ways to still talk about science and paleontology while not doing it through the traditional avenue that most museums have been doing it through when it's suddenly not available to us.
Yeah, it totally
Right,
wasn't
and you
a
have
way for me just to talk to people. Sorry,
I need
Zach.
social interaction, guys.
Sorry, Zach. I didn't mean to interrupt you with my stupid joke.
It is every Friday appointment to talk about science and museums, so...
Like, I definitely think one of my biggest stress relievers, because it's a tense time right now. My biggest stress reliever right now is all of the Field Museum's Sue content. Just the person with the inflatable T-Rex suit running around. Somehow that's just mental catharsis for me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Zach. Thank you for joining us and telling us your story here on Fossil Friday Chats. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Zach, do you have any last words for anyone who might be considering going into science communication or what we call alternative jobs? It's different jobs. We're gonna call it that from now on.
I mean, if you're going into science communication, science in the public, anything of that sort, the big thing for me, the big takeaway I've had is you're gonna be put into positions where you're not in your comfort zone, and that's okay. It's actually good. Being uncomfortable means that makes you open up, that makes you more adaptable. You know, one of my descriptions for being just a paleontologist is the Swiss Army scientist. You had to know so many different facets. And it works for any science discipline, and science communication is no different. Just be willing to just engage. If you want to go into it, just treat it with an open mind. It'll be uncomfortable at first, but I guarantee you once it's done, you won't have any issues talking to people in general or with whatever you're interested in.
Great. Thanks.
So, thank you.
Britt, do you have any announcements for the Western Science Center before we close out?
Just that, as always, our virtual field trips and other digital programs are now available. So if you guys are interested in that, go ahead to our website. We're really trying to make sure we've got more stuff available for educators, parents, and people who are interested in science alike.
Thanks. Okay, well, that does it for our episode today. If you want to learn more about Zach, find his podcast, his YouTube channel. Those are going to be in those links will be in the description below. All of the links for supporting the Fossil Friday Chat show and all of our programs at the ALF Museum and the Western Science Center will be there too. And as always, if you want to hear more amazing stories from the world of paleontology, join us next Fossil Friday for another episode, and make sure you like and subscribe. Thanks, everybody. Bye.